Hello, this is GSIS Productions, and today we have Mr. Krugler. How are you doing, Mr. Krugler?
Doing well, thank you.
Good to have you here, and yeah, tell us more about yourself, and yeah, just a short introduction.
I was born in the state of Michigan. I'm 8th out of 9 children in my family. My father was a pastor, so I grew up in a Christian home, so that's always been important to me. After graduating high school, I went to Valparaiso University in Indiana, majored in social work, and then I worked in their admissions office for 11 years after graduating, before moving to Korea as a high school counselor.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you this question. How did you start pursuing a career of counselor? Because it's like, yeah, and I just wanted to ask you that question.
Okay. So I was an admissions counselor for 11 years at Valparaiso, and then a job at Seoul Foreign School opened up, and so I heard about it, so I applied and thought I would try for 2 years, and that became then 23 years at SFS. Because when I worked in college admissions, I put myself on the road more than anybody, visiting high schools, talking to high school students. And so I thought I'd try being on the high school side, and within the first month I knew that I wasn't going back to the college side. I just really enjoyed being in a high school setting, talking with high school students, helping high school students, and so that's what really got me into the job.
What's like the biggest difference between like the college side and the high school side?
That's a good question. The college side, I found the relationships with high school students was so much more superficial. Like I was developing a relationship with students to recruit them to my university, and then if they came to the university, they were turned over to student services, and I was off recruiting the next class. Or if they canceled their applications, you lost that relationship. But in high schools, you work with the same students 5 days a week, and you get to know them on a much deeper level, and there's more of a relationship that's built, a true relationship. And then when they graduate, the alumni come back, and so it's just a more meaningful relationship for me.
When did you come to Korea? Like, I heard that like you stayed here for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, and I think some viewers might want to know.
I arrived on July 31st, 1994.
Oh, wow. You remember the date?
And a very momentous day. And this is starting my 30th year in Korea.
How was your first experience in Korea? Was it like completely different? How did you like adapt to a new environment? Yeah,
it was different for me because it was the first time I was truly a minority in a country, but in Korea in 1994 is much different than it is today. There were much less foreigners that lived here, and so as foreigners we were stared at all the time, and there is much less foreign products that you could buy. And there's much less English spoken, but it was still very exciting to be here. It was exciting to explore a new country, to start to learn new culture and customs that way. It was a very exciting time, even though it was very different. I've seen Korea change a lot over the years. A lot more of these tall apartment buildings have been put up in place of some low, like old traditional Korean homes that were all torn down. And to me, it's progress, but it's also sad because I feel like Korea's lost some of its culture when all those old traditional like Hanok homes were torn down.
Oh, was it like common? Not common, but like
there were neighborhoods that were just these old traditional homes, right?
Because I don't really remember.
You won't remember. That's right. But they were torn down, and then all these huge apartment complexes were built in their place.
How did you what made you choose Korea instead of like other countries, or like other country, or staying in the States?
Yeah, well, I'd applied for a job at Hong Kong International School in 1992 and was a finalist, but then they hired somebody that was already in Hong Kong for the job as a counselor. And so that started my interest in overseas schools, and then SFS reached out to my admissions instructor, Valparaiso, with the opening, and so it was by God's guidance that I really went to SFS. That he opened the door for me there. It's not that I didn't know anything about Korea before I came, other than watching like the MASH TV series, but I really didn't know much about Korea at all. But it was really, that's what made it even more exciting, I think, to come. That I had no preconceived notions about the country.
Okay.
How did I guess how did the process of the counseling change over time?
Yeah. I think the majority of the students at SFS and here have applied to the U.S. And students who are applying to the U.S. now, the schools are much more competitive to get in. It's much harder to get into many of the top schools. I've had students who have gotten into all the top schools in the U.S. over my years, but lately, probably the last 5 years or so or more, it's become much harder to get in. I would say it's more competitive. So again, when I first came to Korea, there were several schools that now are reach schools for most students, like NYU, Boston University, USC. That anybody could get into when I first came, University of Michigan. But now it's opposite. It's really hard to get into those schools because they've become hot schools. So I'd say that's one thing as far as college counseling goes. Another thing I think is that students today are more open to receiving counseling, like social emotional counseling, than they were when I first came. When I first came, it was still very much closed within the family. The students didn't talk about their family issues outside of the family. So it's hard to kind of figure out what was going on with students. But I think students now are more open with sharing what's going on.
Aside with all the like school related stuff, I wanted to know your hobbies. What do you like to do when you have spare time? And yeah.
Spare time
Yeah.
as a counselor. I do spend a lot of it at school, like going to sporting events or concerts or plays or whatever, or meeting up with alumni. But I love to get out and I love to walk, do a lot of walking. Other hobbies I like to travel. I've been to all 7 continents. So Antarctica was the last continent that I traveled to, which was pretty cool. But yeah, so it was really, I love to travel.
How is Antarctica? Is it just like icebergs?
A lot of icebergs. I was there over Christmas break, which is their summer down there, so to speak. But summer, so there's some days it was really cold, other days when it was raining, and some days I was just in like a sweatshirt with no outer coat or hat or anything. So it really, but it wasn't warm necessarily, but it was not bitter cold as you think of it in Antarctica. But I saw like hundreds of thousands of penguins, lots of seals, whales. It's beautiful. It's just like we left this planet and went to another planet because there's no pollution, there's nobody else around. Because we were on a cruise to Antarctica and stopped and went ashore several times. But yeah.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Were there any buildings at all there?
The only, I think, building I saw was on one of the stops we did. The British have an outpost there that we saw, at least, that it was like a post office sort of thing. Yeah.
Out of all the countries you have been to, what's your favorite? I would say, the most memorable one.
I think the most memorable for me probably was Nepal. Went trekking with one of my sisters and her family and some of their friends. To Nepal, so we went trekking in the Annapurna range, and so just seeing the Nepali people who are so poor but yet so happy. They had very little, but they're so happy, and that just showed me that happiness doesn't come from material things, and so that was really meaningful to see the trekking. Then we also went down to the jungle part of Nepal and went whitewater rafting, and spent time in the jungle looking for animals, riding elephants and so forth. So Nepal probably was one of the top countries I'd say that I visited.
I remember you had to take care of Mr. Beck's dog. Can you tell us more about the dog and your experience? Was it your first time and things like that? Yeah.
So growing up, my family always had a dog, and so I was used to having a dog around. It wasn't new for me that way, but it was new for me to be solely responsible for the dog, and so it really changed my daily schedule. That usually I'm not a morning person, but I had to be up by 5:45 in the morning every morning to take him out for about a 30-minute walk before I got ready to come to school, and then after school I'd have to go home, and we did about an hour and a half walk every day. and then we would do about another 30-minute walk before I went to bed at night. And so then also I had to make sure that I was there to feed him and things like that. So it really limited me. I did it because I considered getting a dog when I retire. So I thought that would be a good trial to see if I want a dog when I retire or not. But I know I don't want a dog while I'm working because it's just too much responsibility. But I loved having the company, and there's the unconditional love that a dog gives to a person. I was always excited to see when you come home from work and all of that. So that was really cool. It's good to have company at home that way. But yeah, I do miss him, but I don't miss the responsibility, I guess, at this point, because with a full-time job.
Yeah, that's true. You always like brought the Brownie to our soccer practices and
soccer games.
Yeah, soccer games. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
He's like
he's huge.
He's big. Right?
He's like 33 kg, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
How old is the dog?
It's about 3 years old.
Is it still growing?
No.
It's still growing. Okay.
Yeah.
Is he back with Mr. Beck?
He's with Mr. Beck in Brazil.
Brazil.
Right. And seeing, like here in Korea, he's a big dog, right? And a lot of Koreans are afraid of big dogs because they only have small dogs mostly. So there's one time where these two ladies were walking towards me. They saw him, they turned around and ran the other way. And they're afraid of him. And he's such a gentle dog. And so I got up there and I said, "Oh, sunayo, sunayo." And I said, "Oh, too big." But in Brazil, they love dogs. And so like nobody's afraid of him. So I'm happy for him that way.
I feel like smaller dogs are more aggressive.
Yeah, they are. Because whenever I'd walk him, maybe the small dogs would be aggressive towards him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he'd look at him like, "What's your problem?"
Also, one question was, did you ever learn Korean, like speaking Korean?
아니요.
But
very. I mean, it's embarrassing for me. But yeah, when I first got to SFS, we had a 6-week class for new teachers to learn the basics, how to read, and basic Korean, how to get around, taxi Korean maybe. And so I did that, but after that I stopped. There was they stopped at 6 weeks, but I didn't ever pick up the language, and so that's embarrassing for me to live here 30 years and not speak the language. And so like one time I got into a taxi after I've been at SFS like 22 years, and I told him where I wanted to go in Korean, and so he started talking to me in Korean, and so I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak Korean." So he switched to English, and again I'd been there 22 years. He goes, "So how long have you lived here?" And I said 6 months, and he goes, "Wow, your pronunciation is so good." I thought, if only he knew I'd been here 22 years. So, but yeah. But it's easier now to get around there's more English and that sort of thing than it was back then. But yeah, it's been a challenge that way. I wish I spoke the language to make living here easier, but I've managed, and it's been okay.
I feel like I think most of our seniors are really close to you, but I feel like some of the juniors are not yet close to you, and they don't know like you're really friendly to us, like you're really like open and try to help us through high school. Do you have like anything to say for the new juniors who are kind of like shy, a little shy, and like hesitant to come talk to you or something like that?
Yeah, I think I just encourage everybody to come in and talk. I think that's how we get to know each other, and I think the relationship becomes more comfortable like that. The once I get to know them, they get to know me. I like to joke around and tease a lot, as you know.
ID card.
With your ID cards. But yeah, I try to be approachable. Sometimes I've heard that like, "Oh, I'm scary," because I think part of that comes from like he's the college counselor and he's going to write my college recommendation or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, just lose that. Let's just sit down and talk and share. And so I just encourage everybody to come in. I really want to get to know you, know the students, and for them to get to know me as well. Because I think that's where the wall is broken down, probably, is once you start to have that conversation. And I find out that I'm not so scary. So.
Also, you got lots of snacks here.
Yeah.
If you have your ID, you can come and get some
That's
snacks.
right. That's right.
But without the ID,
no ID, no snack. That's right.
No
That's
ID,
right.
no snack. I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. Thank you for doing a podcast with us.
Sure.
It was a good time, and I got to ask some good questions. And there's the last question. Do you want to ask one?
So we have our podcast tradition of asking the guests their favorite song, and which we'll put as the outro of the podcast. So, yeah, would you like to share your favorite song?
It's hard to say which one. I do like Hail to the Victors, which is University of Michigan fight song, but I would choose Oceans by Hillsong United. Just because, again, faith is so important to me, and it's a faith-based song. I would say a praise song, and really, I think, gives me a lot of comfort as I'm going through challenging times, and that's just my faith. And so, Oceans.
Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Krugler. You can just exit. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep. My faith will stand.